Let's jump into our text today. We're in John chapter 6. So if you will turn to John chapter 6, we are continuing the Belief Project, which is a journey through the Gospel of John. John wrote his Gospel as an insider, as one of the best friends of Jesus. And he tells us at the end of the book why he wrote the book. He said, I wrote these things that you might believe. And we are in the Belief Project. And he says, because believing, you are given life. You're granted life through belief. Now, sometimes when we hear that, we think that means belief unto salvation. But what we discover, what we say a lot here at City Church, is that we preach the gospel to ourselves every day. We need the gospel every day. We need belief every day. We need life every day. And so this is not just a story about people that need Jesus. This is a story about people that are followers of Jesus and increasing our belief so that we might live lives of life that are marked by life through believing in Jesus. So in the Belief Project, we are hearing stories about Jesus, the story of Jesus, and how that generates life, how that generates belief in our hearts. So we're in John chapter 6 today. We're going to start out with a little test. I need your help on this. Here's the question. What is necessary, what is required for a person to be able to walk? What's required? What's necessary? There's a few things that are necessary for a person to be able to walk. What's the most obvious one? We need some type of appendages, right? Preferably legs. But with modern technology, we know that even people who lose their legs in some type of accident or something, they still are able to walk with the right appendages. So you need some type of leg. Appendages and feet also would be awesome to be able to walk. There's a couple of things we're learning about baby Levi as he's trying to make that transition from crawling to standing to walking. When you're a little kid beginning to learn how to walk, there's a couple of things you need besides legs. You need to be able to keep your what? Balance. So he's in the whole like, I'm up, I'm down. All right, I'm not going to go down because I might not get back up, but you know what I mean. He's down after a couple seconds of standing, so you need some balance to be able to walk. The idea of walking not only includes legs and balance, but it also includes mobility, right? Walking means I have to actually take steps and move forward. So those are two things that baby Levi is learning. Balance, and then this next one is mobility, being able to take that first step. So we need some type of legs. We need balance. We need mobility. We also have to have the will to walk, right? You can be able to walk, but lay in your bed all day and not walk. So you have to have a desire, a want to walk. And then there's one more thing you have to walk. You can have legs and you can have desire and mobility and balance, but you also have to have what? Something to walk on. I'm not sure that was the right grammar. You have to have something upon which to walk. There you go. Don't end your sentences in prepositions, I've been told. You have to have something upon which to walk. Something solid. It could be rock, it could be gravel, it could be concrete, it could be carpet. It could be sand. It could be a lot of different solid things. I've even seen people walk on hot coals. I've seen people walk on a small wire that is stretched across something. I've seen video of a guy walking across a wire across the Grand Canyon. But either way, if it's concrete, rock, sand, carpet, tile, wood, whatever it is, hot coals or wire, you have to have something upon which to walk. You cannot walk upon non-solids, which I looked up. What are the non-solids? And the technical dictionary definition of a non-solid is something that is not solid. Man, I'm so thankful for dictionaries. Something that is not solid. You can't walk on air. Now, I have a son that's a basketball player. I was a basketball player through high school and college, and I know that there were times I could jump really high. There was a time in my life, believe it or not, I could jump straight up off of 2 feet and dunk the ball with 2 hands. I could jump pretty high for a white boy that's, 6'1". My son got his first dunk last week. And so he's 10th grader, 6 feet. He can jump fairly high. I've seen guys that could jump really long distances and really high. Some people might even say they are walking on the air, that they can jump so high. The most famous of all, the air walker that kind of adopted the name, was a guy named Michael Jordan, who happened to play at the University of North Carolina. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that. Greatest basketball player of all time. Came from the university I happened to pull for and lived near when I was growing up. But that's beside the point. You can't technically walk on air. No matter how high you can jump, you can't just stay up there and walk around for a little while. You can't walk on gas. You can't walk on liquids. You can't walk on non-solids. Something solid is required under your feet or you will fail every single time. It is not possible to walk on non-solid objects. When we were on our vacation this summer, we spent a day at the lake with Ashley's parents. They have a boat. They took us out tubing. I feel like I'm getting ready to sneeze. Can you cut that out of the video? We were tubing, and while I was tubing, I was like to be kind of throw me off the tube kind of mindset, so go as fast and whatever you have to do to try to get me off. And so sharp turns and speed are obviously the ways to try to get people off. And when I got thrown off, I was going so fast and had a life jacket that it looked like for about, seemed like 30 seconds, it's probably like 0.3 seconds. I was just gliding across the top of the water when I came off the tube, gliding across the top of the water, and then just kind of the water just kind of enveloped around me, and I went under. So this led to a conversation, because when I got back in the boat, Zach was like, "Dad, you look like you're gliding on top of the water." It's like, I felt like I was gliding on top of the water. So this led to a conversation with my son and oldest daughter, Kaylee, about if you were going fast enough, could you just go across the top of water? Like if you're just fast enough, could you go across water without going into the water? And my conclusion was that no. I mean, you might be able to skim across the top of the water like a rock, but eventually you're going to go into the water because you have to have something solid underneath you. It's not just a matter of speed. You can't walk on non-solid objects, except in our text today. Jesus does the impossible. He walks on water. He's not skiing. He's not surfing. He's not tubing and getting thrown off the tube. He's not buoyant. Isn't that the word for something that floats? Buoyant. He's not buoyant. He's not built in a buoyant way where he can just float on top of the water. He does the impossible. He violates the laws of nature and walks on water during a storm. Let's read the verse is together. John 6, verse 16. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. And when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." I love this next little phrase. Then they were glad to take him into the boat. What else are they going to let him do? Like just keep on walking? Then they were glad to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. We're not going to focus on that last little miracle. We're going to focus on the first one, but that is something that sometimes we miss in the text, that when Jesus got in the boat, immediately they were where they were headed. They were immediately at the land. So remember the context of the story. Jesus has fed a multitude with a lunch. Took a lunch of 5 barley loaves, poor boy's food, multiplied it, and fed a multitude with enough leftovers for 12 baskets. Obviously, the people love him as a result of this miracle. As a matter of fact, we saw last week they want to make him king. I mean, who doesn't want a king that can heal sick people, that can feed hungry people out of simple scraps? I mean, they would never have to work again. They would never go hungry again. They would never get sick again. Who doesn't want this type of king? Overthrow Caesar, put Jesus on the throne, and we'll never have to worry about being hungry or sick or in want again. I mean, like, even the disciples are on board with this plan. I mean, they're thinking in their minds, we get to be VPs of the kingdom. We're fully on board with this. Jesus, you take over. We'll serve at your right and left hand. But instead of joining the rally and jumping on board with the plan, Jesus dismisses the crowd. He says, here's the plan. You guys go home. He sends his disciples away in a boat to cross over to the other side of the sea, and Jesus retreats by himself to the mountain to pray. Let me hit the pause button right here for a moment to say, sometimes it's very easy for us in life to get caught up in the hype and the applause of ourselves. When people celebrate who we are and what we've done, it's easy for us to get caught up in the applause. Little Levi's learning how to clap. Yay, yay, yay. It's easy to get caught up in the applause of life. As a matter of fact, to live for it. To live for approval, to live for the applause. I think Lady Gaga even wrote a song. I live for the applause, the applause, the applause, the applause, the applause. She says it like a bunch of times. She lives for the applause. It's easy for us to get caught up in the applause of life, to live for the approval, to live for the applause of others, to live with the idea that I'm making other people happy, that I am pleasing other people. It's fascinating to me that time and time again in the story of Jesus, that Jesus spends a lot of his alone time with God when he has been successful, when he has been recognized, when he has been celebrated, like in this story. Let's make Jesus king. Jesus sends them away and retreats into the mountain to pray. Jesus spends as much alone time with God when he is being celebrated as when he is being tested, when things are against him. Here's kind of a bonus thought for the message today. If you learn to rely upon God when the seas are calm, it is easier to trust him during the storms. You know the hardest times for me to trust Jesus? When my bank account's full, my marriage is happy, my kids are doing well, when they're healthy and things are going well in school, where we're all getting along, where things seem to be in our favor, when we're hashtagging out blessed about everything. It's harder for me to trust Jesus in those moments, when things are in my favor. Because in the storms, it's like we need to rely upon someone. And I think that's why the New Testament teaches that Jesus was constantly withdrawing and retreating to be alone during the times that people were recognizing him and applauding him and celebrating him. It's easier to grow self-dependent when everything is going smooth. Storms force us to rely on someone bigger than us. Has anyone ever been sailing before? Like on a big sailboat. So we had the opportunity to go sailing a few years ago when we were in Mexico, in Cabo, San Lucas. We went out on a sailing trip. And it was kind of cool going out. The sail was not up. We just kind of went out to our destination, hung out, ate, swam, snorkeled, those type of things. And then the sailing experience was going to take place on the way back. And so when we're headed back, we had no idea what to expect. Everything was calm and cool. And then they put the sail up. And when they put the sail up, the boat literally does this. Like you are on your side or you feel like you're laying on your back. I mean, it's all a part of the experience. The boat can't flip because of how it's designed. But when that sail goes up and the wind catches it, you feel like that thing could turn over at any moment. And it was in that moment when we are laughing and a little bit like holding on, a little bit nervous. It's in that moment that I realized how important a captain is on a ship, on a boat. I needed someone with more experience and more knowledge and more capability than I had. Because when the wind came out and the sail went up and the boat felt like it was going to flip, I was glad that there was someone on board that had experience, that I needed a captain in that moment. So as Jesus is praying alone, his disciples are down in the sea battling a storm in the middle of the night, in the middle of the sea, and they're making very little headway. They are alone in the storm. Storms are a reality of life, aren't they? Both literal storms and life storms. By the way, before you move to the state of Alabama, you should really sign a waiver, or they should give you some kind of heads up. When you move to the state of Alabama, a tornado may land on your house and you might die or lose everything. Like, they didn't give us any kind of heads up about that before we got here. I just hear alarms going off, like, what's going on? What's that giant siren? Why are people running? They're getting into a hole in the ground. Really need to give people a heads up. Storms are a reality in life. I say that you're in one of three places this morning. You are either about to face a storm, you are in a storm, or you're coming out of one. I mean, that's the reality of life. You're about to face one, you're either in the middle of one, or you're coming out of a season of stormy weather in your life. Storms are inevitable. They are unavoidable. And in case you haven't noticed, being a Jesus follower doesn't exempt you from the storm, does it? As a matter of fact, it might intensify it. Jesus talks about storms, that we'll be in the midst of storms as his followers. If you've ever read what we call the Hall of Faith in Hebrews chapter 11, it's about all of these saints of God, these followers of God that had incredible faith. And then you kind of read the last part of the chapter, and all these incredible saints of God got their heads chopped off. They were sawn in half. They lived in caves. They were eaten by wild animals. Like, that's our Hall of Faith. In Hebrews chapter 11, the storms are inevitable. They will come. Following Jesus may intensify the storm. What I know about storms from this text and from life experiences are a few things. This story reminds us that storms are dark, aren't they? Look again in 16 and 17. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into the boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum, and it was now dark. And Jesus had not yet come to them. Most New Testament scholars, based on what we're told here in the other Gospels, think that it's probably between 3 and 6 a.m. when this happened. It's in the middle of the night. Storms are dark. And no doubt, life's storms can create doubt and fear and anxiety and unbelief. The symbol of darkness in John's story, in John's gospel, actually is equated with the idea of unbelief. So when we see the concept of darkness in John's gospel, he's often talking about unbelief. And so the equation here is that the storms of life can generate feelings of doubt, insecurity, and unbelief. Storms, you can relate to this, storms can hinder you from seeing clearly, from thinking clearly. Storms can prevent you from trusting, from seeing life clearly. Have you ever been in a position in life where you thought, is God really there? Is God here in the midst of this? Does God even care about what I'm going through? You ever been in a which way is up place in life? Where you can't see clearly, think clearly, understand clearly? You ever been in a place in life where you thought, where do I go from here? Like, I don't know what my next step is, because storms cause us to lose sight, to lose faith, to lose hope. Often in the middle of storms, we can't see a way out. I don't know how this is going to work out, because storms can be a very dark place. Storms can also be very dangerous, can't they? Verse 18, the sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. It was common knowledge that on the Sea of Galilee, because of how it's positioned, that very quick rising storms or squalls would happen that would threaten the lives of the most seasoned fishermen. We see it here in this story. I mean, these guys are not novices. These are experienced seamen. They are experienced fishermen. These are guys that, I mean, if they were alive today, their reality show would be the ones that we watch. They would be the Deadliest Catch, right? These would be the guys out there trying to catch the Alaskan crab or the tuna or whatever it is those guys catch in the middle of the storm with their lives being threatened. I mean, even on those reality shows in modern television, there's been multiple people who have died that have been on those shows because of the danger of the storm. Storms are dangerous. They're unexpected. And so as we live life, the quick rising squalls of life can be very unsafe, very perilous to your faith. They can disrupt your family unity. They can capsize your life. They can upend your relationships. And in a moment's time, you can be tossed into the depths of the wavy seas of life. They're very dangerous. We live in a broken world filled with broken people. And storms are around the corner, and they can be very dangerous to our family, to our faith, to our health. Storms can be very dangerous as we live life. But we also see in our text that storms create a sense of desperation, don't they? 19, the very first phrase, when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles. After rowing 3 to 4 miles and making very little progress, the disciples are exhausted and they are desperate. They are alone in a troubled sea. And storms can create a sense of absolute dependency upon God because they create absolute desperation. Do you know sometimes it's hard to see Jesus as all you need until you realize Jesus is all you have? Let me say that again. Sometimes it's difficult to see that Jesus is all I need until Jesus is all I have. Moments of desperation. Moments of dependency. We just sang it. Jesus, I need you. Dark, dangerous, desperate, and they were alone in a very precarious situation. Does that ever describe your life? Ever describe how you feel at times? Dark, desperate, dangerous. I'm not sure which direction my life's going to take. I'm not sure about my faith right now. A lot of uncertainties, a lot of doubts. I'm not sure what's going to happen in my marriage. I can't really see a way out. There's not a job waiting for me around the corner. I'm not sure where the next paycheck's going to come from. I'm not sure what's going on with the kid I haven't talked to in 2 years. I'm not sure what's going on in life with my job, with my friend. Not sure what's going on at school. I feel isolated and alone. You ever been in a place in life where the storms are real? Storms create those feelings, don't they? So what does Jesus do? In the midst of this storm, what does Jesus do? I like how John, the disciple, just casually says, again in 19, they'd rowed 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat. Like he just says it, like it's not even a full sentence. Like they just saw Jesus walking on the sea, coming toward the boat. They can't get to Jesus. As a matter of fact, they're not even sure where he is. They can't get to Jesus. So what does Jesus do? Jesus comes to them. Isn't that the story of redemption throughout the whole Bible? From Genesis forward, God seeks us out. Jesus comes to us. When we are in the midst of our storms and we're unsure where Jesus is, we're unsure if God is there, Jesus comes to us. That is the story of redemption time and time again. When I was a sinner, Jesus came to me. When I was desperately sinful in the darkened state of my own sinful heart, Jesus came to me. Jesus comes walking on the seas of my life and comes to me. Now, I want to show you something about this text that sometimes we miss. This story is recorded in multiple Gospels. Let me read you just one verse from Mark's version of the story. And Mark, most believe, was kind of writing on behalf of Peter. And so Mark is kind of Peter's gospel, okay? And so Peter's kind of telling Mark about the story of Jesus, and Mark's the one that's writing all this down. And so from Peter's perspective, which, by the way, in other accounts of Jesus walking on the sea, Peter's the guy that gets out of the boat and walks as well until he has a lapse in faith, but that's a different message. Hebrews 6:48, same story. And he saw, and he hears Jesus, and Jesus saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. And about the 4th watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. And then look at this next phrase that Peter gives us through Mark. He meant to pass by them. What? What does that mean? He meant to pass by them. Like, are there passing lanes in the troubled ocean? In the troubled sea, like Jesus is in the left-hand lane, which, by the way, if you're driving and you're passing people, that's where you're supposed to be. You're not supposed to be driving in the left-hand lane if you're not going to be passing. Get in the right hand, please. I wish I just had that on the front of my car, like just flashing. Get in the right lane. Jesus, please forgive me for my attitude. What does that mean? Jesus is in the passing lane. He's going to go by them. What's up, fellas? Good luck with the storm. Remember, the Bible is one book telling us about a God who seeks out and redeems his people. Remember, the Old Testament is connected to the New, that the Old Testament finds its fulfillment in Jesus, that when we read the Bible, we're reading through the lens of Jesus. It's pointing to Jesus, that Jesus is God in the flesh. This word, to pass by, in the original language, this verb that's used here, is usually used in connection to when God reveals himself to his people. In the Old Testament, we call that an epiphany, that God would reveal himself in human form to his people, to the human realm. Let me show you what this is connected to. Exodus 33. If you have a Bible, I want to go there. Exodus 33, 17. I told you this, John 6 is closely tied to the Exodus account. This is God talking to Moses. Let me put this in context for you. The people of Israel have sinned against God. Remember the whole golden calf thing? Moses is up on the mountain, gone longer than they wanted him to be gone. So they're like, hey, we need a God. Aaron's like, bring me all your jewelry. Throws it in the fire, and then he claims to Moses, hey, look, I just threw the jewelry in the fire, and this golden cow came out, and we decided to worship it. Sounds like a great plan. So Aaron puts up this golden cow. They all start worshiping. Moses comes down, and obviously he's ticked off, breaks the 10 Commandments, all that thing that we see played out in Bible story books. And so the people have sinned against God. They've erected this golden calf, and God is fed up. And he threatens to withdraw his presence from God's people, from the Israelites. And Moses pleads on their behalf. He intercedes on behalf of God's people. The presence of God is what makes God's people different, Moses said. It's what separates us. And so because of Moses, God agrees to remain with the people. And so Moses says, God, would you give me some type of guarantee? Would you allow me to see your glory? So pick up Exodus 33, 17. The Lord said to Moses, this very thing that you have spoken I will do, for you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name. Love that phrase. I know you by name. Moses said, please show me your glory. Give me a guarantee, God. And God said, I will make all my goodness, look at this phrase, pass before you, and I will proclaim before you my name, the Lord. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious. I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. But he said, you cannot see my face, Moses, for man shall not see me and live. And the Lord said, behold, there is a place by me where you will stand on the rock. And while my glory passes by, there's our phrase, my glory passes by, I will put you in the cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you will see my back, but my face shall not be seen. So Moses says, God, I want to see your glory, to guarantee that you're not just going to pour down judgment, that you're going to actually remain with your people, that you're going to stay with us. And God says to Moses, you can't see me and live. Like I'm that holy and you're that sinful. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hide you in the cleft of the rock. Now there's a couple of old hymns that adopt that phrase that I love, that we're hidden in the cleft of the rock. But God says, I'm going to hide you, Moses, in the cleft of the rock. And I'm going to allow you to get a glimpse of who I am as I pass by. You can't see me face to face, but as I pass by, I'm going to give you a glimpse of who I am. Fast forward to Jesus on the sea. Peter says through Mark, Jesus would have passed by the disciples. Same idea. Jesus would pass by. What is Jesus doing on the troubled sea? He is revealing to the disciples who he is. That he is God the Creator. That he is the God of Moses. He is allowing the disciples to get a glimpse of who he is. Now, make this connection because this is important. While Moses is only allowed a glimpse of who God is, the disciples are experiencing God in the flesh. Jesus is the ultimate display of God himself. In the Jesus story, in the incarnation, when God became human, God takes away the veil. He takes away the secret. He lives among us. He is present with us. He takes on human flesh and becomes one of us. You understand the deep Old Testament imagery that's happening in this story? It's not that Jesus is in the passing lane going to blow by the boat because they're driving too slow. Jesus is passing by to give them a glimpse, to allow them to understand this guy controls the seas. He's walking on the water. The only connection we have to someone who walks on the water and controls the sea is the God of Moses, the God of the Old Testament. Jesus is that same God. In the Old Testament, God is viewed as the one who controls the winds, who controls the waves, because he created them. Remember in the Exodus story, it is God and God alone who opened up the Red Sea so that his people could cross over. It was God who calmed the troubled seas and the angry waves and made a path for his people to pass. The Old Testament taught its people that God is a sovereign God who is in absolute control over the seas of life. And now in the story of Jesus, God enters our story. Jesus walks on the water so that his followers understand Jesus is not just a king that feeds hungry people and cures diseases. He is the God of heaven. He is the creator God who has been robed in flesh. He is the Messiah. And as Jesus walks on the water before his disciples, he is saying to them, I am greater than Moses. The Moses that God used to deliver the Israelites from Egypt, the Moses that parted the Red Sea, the Moses that called down manna from heaven. Jesus is greater than Moses because he is the God who controls the winds and the waves. Isn't that a powerful concept found in this story? He would have passed them by. What is it saying? Same God as the God of the Old Testament, who could only allow Moses a glimpse of who he was. But in Jesus, the story of Jesus, God came in the flesh and lived intimately among his followers, lived with us, ate with us, lived among us, lived as a human, walked to us in the troubled seas. Now, notice where Jesus is. He's in the storm. He's not on the mountaintop where we expect to find God. He's in the middle of the storm. Jesus descends into our mess. He enters into our world. The Hebrew writer says in chapter 4 and verse 15 that he understands, he empathizes with us. That he understands us. He empathizes with our weaknesses. He empathizes with our struggles. That he sympathizes with what we go through. He enters into our storm. He is in the storm. He's not removed from it. He's not looking down on it saying, I hope they make it. Jesus is in the storm with us. He comes to us. That is the gospel. That even in the storms of life, when it feels dark and we feel desperate and we feel alone and we feel afraid, that Jesus comes to us. He seeks us out because that's what God does. He seeks out broken people in a broken world. That's the gospel. Man, how do the disciples respond? Exactly like you and I would respond. They see Jesus walking on the water, coming near the boat, and they were frightened. Mark says they cried out in fear, thinking it was a ghost. They were so afraid. Verse 20, but he said to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." Jesus says, don't be afraid. It is I. Says the guy walking on the water, by the way. Don't be afraid. It's me. Of course, you're walking on the water. We're afraid. In other words, Jesus says, there's no reason to be afraid. You're in the middle of the storm? Yes. Waves are big? Yes. It's dark, frightening. You're desperate? Yes. Take heart, Jesus says. Do not be afraid. Whatever scares you the most is under His control. Whatever frightens you the most in life is under His control. Ever how dark, desperate, it's under His control. Sickness, death, fear of losing a child, fear of not making it, fear of losing everything, it's under His control. Let me make one more Old Testament connection for you here. Jesus uses an interesting phrase when He says to them, "It is I." I don't normally throw a lot of original language words out to you. I want to give you this one because this is extremely important. This word in the original language is ego eimi. Ego eimi. Here's how it is literally translated. If we were just to take the ego, which means I, and the I, me, that means I am. When Jesus approaches the boat, He says, ego eimi, I am. You recognize that phrase? I am. Remember Exodus 3? God comes to the stuttering, stammering, hiding, murdering, insecure Moses on the backside of the desert. And He tells him He's going to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And Moses says, who, me? I can't even talk plainly. I'm not even capable. And God says, exactly, you're not. And Moses says, well, if I go, who am I going to say sent me? And God says, you tell them that I am sent you. I am who I am. I am sent you. What does that phrase mean, I am? It means that God exists as an eternal now, that He is always in the present. He's not taken surprised by the future. He doesn't have regrets for the past because He lives in the eternal present, the eternal now, that God exists above time, that God exists beyond time, that He is the eternal now, the great I am. God is bigger than the past. God is bigger than the present. God is bigger than the future. God is in control of all of life. And as Jesus approaches the boat, He says, do not be afraid, for I am. Jesus is identifying Himself with the God of Moses, with the God of the Exodus, that there is no reason to be afraid because the great I am is present. God comes to us as the eternal I am. How does that break down in your life? There is nothing in your past, nothing in your present, nothing in your future that can keep God from you. There is nothing in your past, present, or future that can keep you from God. He is the eternal I am. Listen to me. God doesn't come to you because of who you are. God doesn't come to you because of who you are not. The gospel says God comes to us because of who He is. Because He is the great I am. Because He loves us. Because He comes to us when we are sinners. He comes to you where you are. With your past, He comes to you. Some of you have a past, just like me. Some of you have a past. You wish you could rewrite that chapter. How could God ever love me with that in my past? God comes to you with your past. God comes to you with where you're living in the present. Some of you are making decisions right now that are dishonoring to God. They're destructive to your life. Devin, you understand what I'm doing. You understand the sin in my life. I don't, but God comes to you right where you are with your present. Devin, I have no idea what is awaiting me, what my future holds, what's around the corner. God comes to you regardless of your past, regardless of your present, regardless of what your future holds. God knows and understands. He is above time, and He comes to us right where we are. Not only does He come to us, but look what Jesus does. Jesus gets in the boat. Then they were glad to take Him into the boat. Jesus gets in the boat. He gets up close and personal with them. He enters into their broken world. God is not so big, God is not so removed that He refuses to enter our space. The God who created the seas is the same God who gets in our boats when the storm arises. God doesn't leave me to battle the storms of life alone. God doesn't say good luck. Jesus says, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I am with you. When the struggles come, I am there. When the storms come, I am there. When the sickness comes, I am here. When the suffering comes, I am here. When sin invades your life, I am here. When death itself comes, Jesus says, I am with you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I am here. Who is here? The great I am. The song was playing when I came up. In the middle of the storm, I am. I am. He is here. Storms are coming, aren't they? They're inevitable. They're unavoidable. Some of them are showers. Some of them are tornadoes. But they're coming. Storms look different for every one of us. They look different. Some of them are emotional, relational, spiritual, financial, physical. Storms may come in the form of death. Storms may come in the form of divorce, with a diagnosis, with job loss, with a broken relationship, with an economic shift. Storms may come in the form of a teenager. Storms are coming. And they look different for each one of us as we seek to follow Jesus. Storms take many shapes. But here's what I can know. As I follow Jesus, I can know that Jesus is in control of life storms. Nothing takes Him by surprise. He's in absolute control. And not only is He in control, but He is near. He is close. He is in the boat. He can be trusted. When Zach was just a toddler, he was sleeping in his room, and there was a dark storm that came up, a thunderstorm, lightning storm. And it woke him up as just a 2 or 3 year old boy. And he started to do what he knew to do. He started to cry and call out for his daddy. And so I went to his room, and I wasn't wearing a shirt, and I picked him up, and he was scared. You could feel his little trembling body. If you've been a parent for very long, you've had those moments. And he was trembling, and I took him as his dad and just held him right here, right against my chest. And I held him close. And you could feel his little body just take a deep breath and relax. And the only thing I knew to tell him in that moment was, Zach, it's okay. Daddy's here. You're going to be okay. Daddy's here. You can go to sleep. Because Daddy's here. And that's what he did. Laid his little head on my chest. Went to sleep. Because Daddy was there. Whatever storm you're going through in life, Jesus is not removed. He's not watching from a distance. He's not saying good luck. He is close. And he comes to us in our most dark and desperate and lonely moments. And he says to us, it's going to be okay. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I'm here. I'm here. A lot of you are like me. I've been through some dark seasons in life. I've been through some desperate times. I've laid in the bed and wept over my own brokenness and feeling alone and feeling desperate and feeling like no one was there and no one cared. I've been there. Have you been there? We've been there, right? And it was in those dark and desperate and lonely moments that God would do his work to say, Devin, no matter how far you run, no matter how far you turn, no matter how alone you feel, I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. And I'll be here, right? No matter how long this season lasts, no matter how dark it gets, no matter how desperate you get, I am here and I will be here. I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. It's going to be okay. You can rest because Jesus is here.